Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Xiong. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. China has an urban population of roughly 900 million, while another 500 million live in rural areas. Urbanites earned close to 44,000 yuan on average in 2020, while rural residents averaged a little over 17,000 yuan. That rural income figure rose 82% from 2013, growing faster than the 66% increase for urban dwellers, given the low base figure in the countryside. But the gap in actual income widened by 57% over the 7-year period. Rural sanitation is improving as 83% of villagers had access to running water at the end of 2020, up from 76% in 2015. But they are falling behind the 99% rate for urbanites in 2019. China's rural areas have few work options outside agriculture, and the farming field lacks business growth. In the 1990s, millions of rural Chinese left their homes and poured into cities in search of work, leaving hollowed-out villages in their wake. 3 decades later, jobs aren't the only reason residents are abandoning the countryside. With many rural schools struggling, families are hunting for better options elsewhere. Some send their kids to boarding schools. Those with more resources are buying or renting homes in nearby towns and cities. The mothers or grandparents accompany the kids, taking care of them while they study, a practice known in Chinese as Peidu. This has led to a vicious cycle. From the perspective of individuals and families, moving to the city offers the possibility of higher incomes and greater opportunities for their children. As the rural labor and brain drain intensifies, however, rural communities are driven further into decline, worsening the structural inequalities between the countryside and the cities and pushing more residents to migrate. The history of Peidu bears this out. In order to improve the quality of education and optimize resource allocation, the State Council, China's cabinet, ordered a round of rural school closures and consolidations in 2001. The number of primary schools in rural areas shrunk from 416,000 in 2001 to 155,000 in 2012. The side effects of the new policy, however unintended, were hard to ignore. Dropout rates rose rapidly, and young students in remote areas faced staggering commutes. The central government itself repeatedly criticized the unreasonable closure of many schools. In 2012, after a spate of accidents involving school buses, the State Council abandoned the policy and ordered the localities to reopen rural primary schools. But the closures continued. An estimated 16 rural primary schools shuttered every day in 2018, according to a major think tank. The disappearance of rural primary schools helped spur the rise of Peidu, as parents went where the educational resources were. But this process may not have been entirely organic. Ye Jingzhong is a professor at China Agricultural University. He argued that the migration of students and their parents from the countryside to townships was not a side effect of urbanization, but the means by which urbanization was carried out. Using good educational resources as a carrot, local governments drew rural residents into county towns, where they could contribute to urbanization and economic growth. Ye's claims were highly controversial in mainstream Chinese academic circles, where rural decline is typically attributed to urbanization and low birth rates. But a follow-up study by Zhang Yuling, a professor at Nanjing University, found some evidence for his argument. A member of the party committee of Dapu County, Guangdong Province, said in a speech to government leaders that if Dapu wants to develop, it must bring all the children from the countryside to the county seat. The party secretary of Pingguo County in the neighboring Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region likewise stated, Developing education in the county seat can also attract people to the county to promote consumption while simultaneously helping to develop the services industry and urbanization. Urbanization is the key to stimulating development in poorer regions. But one less acknowledged beneficiary of rural to urban educational migration is the real estate sector. That's because Peidu moms and their children generally need to rent or buy an apartment near a school. Wang Dan is an associate professor of education at the University of Hong Kong. In her field work in a central Chinese county, she found that educational migration was a driving force in the local real estate market. One government official there told her, if it wasn't for those students, a lot of homes in the county would go unsold. Spending by Peidu families in towns and the county seats drained the countryside's already limited wealth. Based on researchers' estimate, educational migrants spent an average of 12,600 yuan per family per year in townships and 21,300 yuan in county seats, while the average annual income of the county's rural residents was just 10,300 yuan. 2/3 of the households relied on money sent home by migrant workers, money that was quickly poured into the urban housing market. At a time when the central government is stressing the protection of agricultural output, the migration of Peidu families causes all sorts of problems for the countryside. The large-scale migration of rural laborers has led to reduced agricultural production, as well as increases in land transfers and idle land. Although previous waves of migration also shrunk the rural labor force, the current educational migration wave is even pulling the elderly and the mothers out of rural China, further exacerbating the shortage of agricultural labor. One Peidu mother said she no longer had time to manage her tea trees after moving to the county seat. A Peidu grandmother said that her income from farming more than halved, from 9,000 yuan to 4,000 yuan, because she didn't have enough time to go home and attend to the fields. Because most Peidu parents rarely return to their villages, many either rent out their land to others or simply let it go idle. Finding willing renters isn't easy. For example, a 63-year-old Peidu grandmother complained that she was unable to find anyone to farm her land. The young people have left to find work, and those in their 50s and 60s have gone to the cities to care for their grandchildren at the school, she said. Almost all the village leaders blame the Peidu phenomenon for the increases in unfarmed land. Over 25% of land owned by Peidu household is idle, compared with just 7.7% in non-Peidu households. In the end, the outflow of people from rural areas is being caused by farmers' extreme anxiety for agriculture. Their long-term goal is to lift their children out of agriculture and into the urban middle class. Yet, while practices like Peidu offer a way out of farming for rural families and their children, their promotion only makes closing the rural-urban gap harder. Starting with New Year, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on the nation's youth to seek out new opportunities in rural areas, echoing late Supreme Leader Mao Zedong's call for urban youth to go down to the countryside during the 1966 Cultural Revolution. An editorial in the People's Daily newspaper said, "We should encourage all kinds of talents to give full play to their skills and abilities, talents in our vast countryside, so as to build a strong and a talented team for rural revitalization." More and more young people have responded to the call and devoted themselves to the fervent practice of rural revitalization on the ground. The article said, it said more than 11 million people had returned to rural areas from cities to start up their own business business, including a large number of young people. Xi's buzzword of rural revitalization comes as more than 49% of respondents to a survey by the People's Bank of China said they believe the current situation for job seekers is grim, difficult, or do not know. Amid an ongoing shortage of graduate jobs, the ruling Chinese Communist Party's propaganda machine has started telling young people they shouldn't be too picky about the work they do, even if they hold high-level qualifications from top universities. A March 16 joint social media post from the Communist Party Youth League and the state broadcaster CCTV hit out at growing online complaints from highly qualified graduates about a lack of employment opportunities. The Youth League and the CCTV post gave the example of a young man who had returned to his rural hometown to take up agricultural work, one among a generation of new farmers. Young people told overseas media that they are unwilling to sacrifice themselves for the government's attempt to kickstart the economy without relying on export manufacturing to drive growth. Radio Free Asia reported that a Chinese student in Germany who gave only the nickname Jacob for fear of reprisals said the government is trying to whitewash the dire situation many highly educated young people find themselves in. Higher education is similar to a Ponzi scheme, making you struggle to succeed in the wrong environment, he said. In the end, you find that all your work has been for nothing. Germany-based poet Yang Lian said many young people in China feel as if they don't have a future under Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. They no longer see any opportunities, so why wouldn't they be confused and angry, Yang said. It's going to be impossible for them to keep young people in line by brainwashing them given the current situation. He said the authorities should be grateful that the young people were only reacting by lying flat, an internet buzzword referring to young people's refusal to fight for jobs, cars, spouses, or apartment, as they had done since economic reforms beginning in the 1980s. That is lucky for Xi. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.